remember about 20,000 years ago, at the end
Sure.
of the last ice age, people migrated over the land bridge, which
Hmm.
existed between Asia and North America,
Yep.
right? And that land bridge was there because the water levels were reduced, and most of the seas ice was at the North and South poles,
Hmm.
and in other locations. So the land bridge was exposed,
Yep.
and North America became populated with quite an advanced society based on hunting and gathering,
Hmm.
and they had fire, and they had a lot of engagement with their environment, both
Hmm.
materially and spiritually.
That's right.
But they did not have certain technologies such as metallurgy,
Right.
right? Or other advanced sciences. And for example, they did not develop reading or writing for information
Correct.
exchange. And they were mostly what we would call a Stone Age society.
Hmm.
And very successful and a prosperous one at that. All
Yep.
right. Then, in about the middle of the 14th century, somebody far, far away who'd never been to North America decided that it was theirs. And it
Hmm.
was called the Pope in Rome.
Hmm.
And he made a papal bull. A bull is a proclamation or law. And since the
Right.
Pope considered himself God's voice on earth,
Right.
his word was law for all Christians, or what he thought was all peoples, including non
Hmm.
Christians, because they could be Christian soon and find salvation, right?
Hmm.
With the proper indoctrination and teaching. And he made
Right.
this papal bull saying that anybody who went out over the seas in ships or whatever and discovered other lands far away with other peoples on them, they were automatically given the right to include those newfound places into the domains of the Christian church.
Sure.
Now, Christopher Columbus and others, shortly afterwards, they went to
Yep.
the so called New World, which
Yep.
was already populated by, like I said, all these people, you know, with all of their cultures and all of their practices and all of their rituals and all of their spiritualities and then their own religion, if you can call it that. But they were now under the thumb and under the control of somebody else.
Yep.
Or at least the Pope said so.
Hmm.
So the early conquistadors and the Spanish explorers, and later the French and the English, they all
Yep.
had missionaries on board.
That's right.
People who would come and say, now you are going to convert to our philosophies, our spiritual systems, our religion. And by the way, your home is now ours.
Hmm.
We own it.
Yep.
Now, they didn't push the point too far at first because they were outnumbered. And
That's right.
they needed the cooperation of the First Nations peoples of both North and South America. They needed the cooperations of these peoples for economic purposes. I'm
Hmm.
going to stick just with North America for now. The South American story is far more complex. But
Right.
In North America, the First Nations were treated with a certain amount of respect because they provided an economic benefit in the name of in the form of furs, especially what's the name of that animal? Beaver pelts, which were,
Beaver up in the north and
yes,
buffalo meat down in the south.
buffalo and meat down the south, and on the west coast here it was sea lions what we call seals.
Right.
And their pelts and their furs were highly valued for clothing and
That's
hats
right.
in European aristocratic society, and so on. So, in other words, we're not going to push the point, but this is our new territory, this is our new land, and now you're working for us.
Yep.
Now, later on, when more and more Europeans arrived, conflicts arose, and but due to higher technologies,
Sure.
guns, and
Yep.
sophisticated organization tools such as reading and writing and so on, and agricultural ability, All the First Nations were forced to obey, sign treaties, convert to Catholicism or Christianity, and basically succumb and give up their rights, give up their lands, or at least accept restricted ghettos known as reserves. And in time, there was an organized policy to actually assimilate and absorb them, and that's called genocide. You completely wipe out their culture, their ancestry, and perhaps even their genetics through intermarriage.
Yep.
Okay?
Yep.
And that was the plan. Now, I'd like to just stand back a little bit and look at that process and look at that picture. Now, in our arrogance, we think that the planet Earth itself could not have been subject to a similar process. Don't you think it's possible that there are higher civilizations with higher technologies in the cosmos above the level that has existed on planet Earth in the past or even today?
Sure.
Don't you think there could be beings or entities who are a little bit racially different than us, but certainly higher technology than us, who could just come along and claim our planet and its resources without necessarily asking first? And they do that in their arrogance and in their belief and in their knowledge that there's nothing much that we can do about it.
Right.
We're no different than First Nations living on a reserve under their control.
That's right.
And they've already decided that they own us, and any ownership issues would only be between other races at their level. In other words, the French and the English fought over Quebec. Did they not? And the Spanish and the English fought over South America. Did they not?
Yep.
In other words, the people that lived in those places had no idea what was going on in the 7 Years' War in the 1760s.
That's right.
They had no idea what was going on in the Napoleonic Wars of the late 18th century and early 19th century, because they're not even involved, because they're just a lower level occupant of something that's owned and fought over and competed over with by somebody else who has a much higher level of technology and knowledge scientifically, and you know what, the chickens don't know when the farmer son comes along and the old guy died. They haven't got a clue. Now there's a rumor that I use that word facetiously, there's a rumor that we're undergoing a change in ownership on this planet, that there's new managers in the works, and that perhaps the current agricultural product of this planet is no longer accepted. Because it was a illegitimate and an illegal one in the eyes of others at a cosmic level. It's kind of like beaver pelts going out of fashion. Okay, so the agricultural produce or product, which could involve things like adrenochrome, child sexual slavery and harvesting, or other such horrid concepts, is no longer the economic currency it used to be on this earth, and that new management is more beneficial and more benign, and is more benevolent, and is not interested in exploiting us in that sense any longer. And that there's been a war about that, which is far beyond our comprehension or direct experience, because we're down here in our little reserve. And they're up there on their ivory tower in their castle on their amazing sailing ships. And a technology far beyond what we can possibly understand. And we can only see what's happening in our daily lives as it changes. And it's kind of like what we have in Canada, which is called Truth and Reconciliation. We've treated our First Nations terribly, and now we feel guilty about it. So what we're doing is we're giving them financial compensation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're stopping the oppression. We closed down the residential schools and the assimilation program in the late 80s and early 1990s. Okay,
Right.
we're now recognizing our First Nations as human beings that have equal rights to our own.
Yeah.
We're paying them back for the wrongs that were done.
Sure.
Now, could a similar process be happening globally? I know this is a bit of a
Yes.
stretch. I know this
Mm-hmm.
is a bit of a stretch for people to comprehend, but I
Mm-hmm.
believe there is an analogous relationship between the way that First Nations peoples have been rehabilitated
Yes.
and recompensed,
Mm-hmm.
and the general liberation of this planet from a an oppressor using perhaps human confederates,
Mm-hmm.
using minions,
Yep.
or some people call them the cabal,
Mm-hmm.
or the monarchies. In
Mm-hmm.
in the same way that kings and queens during the times of colonialism used governor generals, government officials, and prime ministers to do their dirty work in oppressing the First Nations of North and South America.
Sure.
Could there be an analogous situation with planet Earth as a whole? Are we undergoing that kind of process now?
I believe so.
Is there evidence around us of our control mechanisms collapsing?
Yes. Bits and pieces of those signs
Yes.
have shown up.
Please continue.
For example, Cabal's main mechanism of control
Financial system.
is the financial system, also known as the money system,
Yeah.
and behind the scenes have always been the Federal Reserves of all kinds, national banks of all kinds, and banks of all kinds.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the idea of a banking system on the surface of this planet Earth is, as a matter of fact, is another form of control.
Certainly.
They lend you money, they charge you compound interest, they set the condition, they want something in return as a form of collateral in
Yep.
case you default, you miss a payment, all kinds of things, all for the benefits of them, not
Absolutely.
you. Okay. On top of that, you have to satisfy their criteria, their conditions before they can, sign it off and loan you some money. But that loan, the conditions in many ways imaginables are very harsh, very
Yes.
cruel, and it's ultimately to their benefits, not you.
Well, in
It's
the
it's
in
far it's
yeah.
far worse than being a beggar begging for sustenance out
Okay.
down in the streets.
Now, are you
It's a
saying?
form of an
Yeah.
exploitation, in my personal
Oh,
opinion.
now what happens to people that are in a system like that? Now, what happened to the First Nations, for example, when they were taken away from their self-sufficiency? When they were no longer able to sustain their communities and their families by hunting and gathering? When they were herded onto reserves and forced to live in an economic system where they
Correct.
were given allowance of money every month?
That's right.
And now they're subsisting on canned foods and things like that.
Right.
You know, like the Inuit, for example, in the far north, they
That's right.
believed they didn't have any idea about the Papal Bull and the idea that Rupert's land now belonged to the British Crown. They were living up there happily in their igloos or their ice homes, thinking
That's
that they
right.
were the only humans in existence.
Hmm.
Right? Well, what you think is not necessarily what's true. There was an alien race that actually owned the Arctic, and you didn't even know about it, you poor Inuit, until Western people suddenly arrived and said, "Oh, by the way, we're going to put an oil well over here, and you're going to live over here, and we're going to give you so many hundreds of dollars a month, and you're going to start living off of imported food." coming to you by airplane, and we're going to give you
That's
some
right.
ski-doos to run around on. And by the way, if you think for 1 minute you're going to continue your traditional livelihood of hunting and gathering and selling seal pelts, well, we're just going to have a propaganda campaign worldwide and
Yeah.
stop anybody from wearing a seal pelt fur
Yeah.
coat to destroy your economy and make you
That's right.
completely dependent upon us and our government control system. No,
That's
I
right.
use the First Nations example because actually we're all First Nations.
Hmm.
Humans are in the same boat, just at a different level.
That's
We're
right.
all controlled by these banks, by
Yep.
these companies, by these corporations. We haven't been self-sufficient since the Middle Ages.
Hmm.
Here we sit in our homes with gardens at the gardens at the front and gardens at the back, but they're not gardens. They're lawns with flowers.
Hmm.
Well, my goodness, why don't you dig that up and grow some vegetables? What's wrong with
Yep.
you? That's insane.
Hmm.
What's wrong? Can't you have a chicken or two? Provide your own eggs? Why do you have to do it at the grocery store? You provide your own eggs. They're much more delicious, by the way. Oh, there's
Well,
laws
it's a
against it.
different form of control.
Yes.
They want you to live that kind of lifestyle and completely dependent on suppliers and the complicated supply chains and so on.
Oh, you
In
mean
other
the carrots
words,
come from?
you are at the mercy of somebody else.
Well, I went to the store and I saw some garlic from China, and I saw some potatoes from United States, and I saw some Brussels sprouts from Mexico.
Mhm.
My goodness! And where are the carrots from? God only knows. Now,
Right.
now, what kind of world is that? And oh, by the way, they're so hypocritical. They say a carbon footprint. You've got a carbon footprint because of, I don't know, you drove to work every day. Well, what about the massive amounts of fossil fuels that are required to truck and ship and boat and train, by train all these fruits and vegetables from all over the place off season, which you don't even need? What am I doing eating a banana in the winter? I don't know. But it came from, Brazil. Well, that's ridiculous. You see?
That's right.
See how this works? And that's part of the
Yeah.
control system too. We're like native Indian or native First Nations people living on a reserve,
That's right.
living off of Dole pineapple juice.
That's right.
What the WEF is going on? Well, that's going to end. It's ending right now, and there might be a higher element to this
Yes.
that's the management part. And I'm just going to tell the truth. I
Hmm.
don't have any more concrete knowledge about who is really owning me, my land, my house, and my family, any more than an Inuit knows that they're part of Rupert's land, or that a First Nations knows that your territory suddenly changed from French to British because of the victory at, in Quebec, at the Battle of Quebec in 1773. That's how ignorant I am.
Hmm.
I don't know what's going on or who owns me or what the management situation is, because there's far higher powers than I can even conceive. But I do
Yeah.
know that if I don't start taking care of myself,
That's right.
I'm in deep trouble.
Hmm. Hmm.
Stop.